Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the next concurrent session of the day, Making Your Own Math Questions. Our presenter today is Dr. Ira Robbin from Central Piedmont Community College. If you have any questions for the presenter during the session, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom room screen, and we will address them as we go through the presentation. And on that note, I will hand it over to our presenter, Dr. Robbin.
Thank you, Daisy. I'm actually from Southern Connecticut State University, which is in New Haven, Connecticut, but I retired from there, so I'm actually in Florida. It doesn't look all that dissimilar from the faux background that you see. Our topic today is making your own questions in Hawks. Hawks has lots of great questions. It's wonderful, but there may be a time when you say, I want a different type of question. I want it phrased a different way. I want some other look at the material. I have a dozen questions from the past and they're not being asked this way in Hawks. And I want to put them into the material so that it's embedded in a very organic way into the course. So you have instructor questions and you have Hawks questions that are generated by the Hawks people themselves. So you should be able to see the presentation here on the left.
Yeah, I don't know if you've shared your screen yet,
Okay.
Dr.
Let
Robbin.
me share the screen then, make sure people can see it. I thought I had, but let's make sure that it is shared. Can people see it now?
I can see it. Yes, sir.
Okay. If you can't, please let us know so that we can, I don't want to do a whole presentation where nobody can see the presentation. So it's making your own questions in Hawks. And now we're going to go to there's some disclaimers here that should just go over very briefly. If you use anything in here and somehow you get sued, it's not my fault. So I'm assuming no liability whatsoever. And it's not a position or statement of current or prior employers, do it this way or do it that way. It's just, I'm offering this for your own good. It may be something you can use. So Hawks really has a nice facility for doing this. Yeah, there are a lot of steps and there are some things you have to go through. You basically put all the parameters, the inputs and outputs to a question in a single row in an Excel sheet. And then the different variations are the way to randomize the question. So you can have 100 rows with the same formulas, and you can have some random inputs on the input fields, and then the formulas produce the answers. And then you'll copy that into Hawks. You're going to copy that whole field of inputs and outputs into Hawks later. You're going to write a question header in Hawks. I'm giving you kind of an overview. We're going to go through this specifically to see how it works. And you add question steps and answers for each steps, and you use LaTeX to add the Greek math symbols and to make it look nice. So that's where we're going. So the first thing is you go to assignments in Hawks. The third one over. And you go down, you see there's a whole bunch of things you can do in managing, and down there is question builder. So we're going to click on question builder. Now it's always a good idea to not lose the question. So I like to create a folder for the question. As you see, I have a whole bunch of folders I've created for a whole bunch of questions about continuous random variables. This is a stat course, cross classification tables, exponential distributions, and it shows how many questions I have in each one of these folders I've set up. It's a good idea to set up a folder so you know, I wanted that question on percentiles. Where is it? Oh, here it is. If you have a nice folder, you can always find it. Once you have a folder for it, the next thing you want to do is create the question. So you're going to click create question. And then that's going to bring this up. And it starts off with step 1. And if you look real carefully, you'll see question header optional. Question header optional. We're going to go to that in a second. I'm going to stop at this point and ask, this is like a how-to, how do you do it? Go through a process. Are there any questions at this point? Okay, then I'm going to continue on with this. You'll see how these things come to be. You'll see the very tiny question header line, and the edit to that is way on the right. So we're going to click the edit question header, and we're going to create a question header. A question header will be shown at the start of each part of the question. You may have a multi-part question. I almost always put in a question header, even if it's a single part, for fear that, well, maybe I want to add a second part to my question. In that case, I'll have to go back in and reset it up anyway. So it just gives you more options as you go through to have the question header already set up. And then when you push at a question header, this thing will pop up. Question header will be seen for each step of the question. Changes here will be reflected for all steps. That's the nice thing. If you try to put a question header type material in each step of a question and you change it in part A, then it's not going to be in B, C, or D. You have to go through and change those other parts. So it's nice to have the question header because of that. By the way, if you want to open your Hawks on the side and see if you can set one up, that's always a good way to do it, learning by doing. When you open it up, you'll see there are things, icons for table, variable manager, and expression builder. Those are the 3 key things you're going to use in setting up math type questions. Okay. Insert a table. If you have a problem that uses a table, and in stat, you often have cross classification tables, and that's the one we're going to look at today. So we are going to insert a table. And you'll see that there's options for putting a first row header. I often use that. Column header, not so much, but there's no reason why you can't. The style is data. There's other different options you could put in. And the caption that you want, in this one I put table of data. You can put whatever the caption is that you'd like it to be. And then show copy data. I always put yes. That allows the students to copy the data into a spreadsheet of their own. So if they see the data in the problem, they can copy it and paste it somewhere else. And that just makes it more convenient for the students. So that's the kind of options you're going to be looking at. For insert table. And now here we have a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet has, and I like to put little notices to myself so I know what it is. So one thing I put in is, I didn't start off on column A, but I'm going to have, when I paste this into Hawks, this will become column A, this will become column B. So this is what I call the Hawks column. It's just a trick. You don't have to have this, but when you paste this into Hawks, I know that this is column A. And then in the setting up the answers and the inputs in the question, I'll have to put A, B, C, or D. I'll have to designate which column I'm going to be using. And this is going to be a cross classification table. And this is really the A1, the leftmost, the 1-1, this is the 1-2 column, and so forth. And here I put numbers. So the A1, B1 column is 50. So that in this case would mean that there's, I guess, 50 male Democrats, A1, B2, 50 male Republicans, A2, B1, 76 female Democrats, and A2B2 is 64 female Republicans. But this, with the types of what the data don't mean anything. It could be sleeps by 10, has GPA over 3, could be buys low-fat yogurt, owns a red car, doesn't own a red car. This kind of setup is so common in stat, and it's important the student understand it. So I can change the words for what I want these labels to be. These will be labels that'll show up on the table. And then the numbers show up. And then here I do the calculations in the spreadsheet, the marginal totals. If you know anything about spreadsheets, these calculations are really easy. And then I can compute probabilities, probability of A1 and B1, both those things happening, conditional probabilities, so forth. And I'm going to ask questions. What is the conditional probability? What's the probability of both of these things, and so forth. So you're set up. You can have more calculations. You don't have to stop here. But this is just an example of how I've set up all these answers in each row of the spreadsheet. And all these numbers here are kind of random. Everything else is calculated. Questions about how the spreadsheet is set up? Okay. So next, we're going to go to the next slide. And we're going to see. So here we have a variable manager. So we're within the header, and now we're clicking on the variable manager icon. And now you see there's this matrix that shows up on the bottom. So we're going to copy paste the Excel range right into Hawks. And now I see within Hawks, that first column is column A, and that's why I have the Hawks header. So I know that, oh yes, this is column A, column B, and so forth. And I never get confused with that. I name a variable. This is kind of strange sometimes. You make up a variable name called XX, and that is the whole matrix. And the D column of XX is what we're going to be putting in certain places, what this says. So let's see how we're going to work this to make a matrix that has something that looks useful. So here I put in XX, A, and B using that variable manager. And when I go to this part of the matrix and I put in C and D. So you maneuver into the matrix, and you'll be putting different things in there when you put in the variable manager. So you go to the matrix, click the variable manager, and then enter that column as we did in the previous slide. Let's go back up. So here I was putting in column D, XXD, and that was for the space over here. The far right column of the, and there's the words data table was the header, and it showed up there. And here was copy data. So the students can copy this whole table onto their own spreadsheet, or just have it anywhere. They could just copy it into a Word document if they want. Okay, so this is very nuts and bolts. And now I'm going to put in the information for the table itself. The first column and the top row are going to be the labels. And then here, the columns E, F, and G, and so forth are going to have the numbers. That's the way the spreadsheet was set up. You could set up your spreadsheet your own way. I just like to keep it organized, though, putting the variables to the left, numbers to the right, and inputs first, answers to the far right. To me, it's very clear, and I color code them as you saw in the spreadsheet. Okay, so we've set all this up. Now what's going to happen? I want to add some questions. Use the variables in the question statement and answers. So I want to ask a question. What's the probability a random selected member is both XXA and XXC? I think that was male and Republican. Express your answer to one decimal. And we're going to see now how to deal with the responses. But basically you're using that whole spreadsheet row to create numbers that show up in the question itself. Now there's options, and you got to sort of take them in sequence. They ask you, how do you want your answer to be? And for problems like this, it's almost always free response, meaning they're going to put in a number, they'll enter into a number. And we're going to want to almost always evaluate it as an expression. Even if it is a number, it's better to have it evaluated as an expression. The Hawks people told me that, and it's always worked for me, so I'm going to go with it. Then there's some advanced options, and within the advanced options, one of them is set the answer tolerance. That's a good idea. So some students will get 42.3%, and the answer is 42.2%. A lot of times I just want to mark that correct, that they're close enough. They obviously didn't get an answer that close by random. They obviously thought it through. I think they've learned enough. I just want to move on and have them go to the next question. I don't want them to get frustrated of if it's say 70% or 80% success, and they go through and they're on like the 10th out of 12 problems, and then they get bumped out and have to go back to the start because they got a small decimal wrong. It's up to you how you want to do that. Set your own answer tolerance. So here's how that looks. Free response shows up here. Advanced option shows here. I put an answer tolerance of 0.002. 0.002. Now, accurate to 6 decimals isn't what you think it means. It means if a student enters 7 or 8 decimals, it will round their answer to 6 decimals. Since the tolerance is 3 decimals, it's sort of like they have a lot of extra decimals they don't really need. And I even put accurate to 1 decimal, but it's not an accuracy of your answer, it's an accuracy of translating their answer, is my understanding. I often just left this where it was, which is usually 6. You come up with a question detail. This is a cross-table, cross-classification table question. That's what I want to call it. And I thought it was medium difficulty. So these are some things that you will put in setting up the question. And so here's what it looks like. And in this case, they went down to I had some things about a late sleeper or early riser being a cum laude student or an average student, and some random generated numbers. And this is from the header, the data table header we talked about. Poll was taken, results summarized in cross-classification table. What's the probability the sample is both a late sleeper and cum laude student? So once we set up that words with the template, it's the matrix. This is column A, I believe, A1, and this is C1, XXA, XXC, A, B, C, D, something like that. Express your answer to 1 decimal. And the answer, correct answer, which is XX, F or G, you'll know when you're doing it, because it's in that matrix in the variable manager. 24.1, and you'll put in percent. It's evaluate as expression. So at first you're going to look at these and say, I don't know quite what I should be putting in. But after a while, you'll be using kind of the same things for most of your problems of a certain type, and you'll feel pretty comfortable with it. Initially, I agree, it can be a little bit, what exactly do I put in? Is that right or not? Questions about how this question header got set up, how this question, step 1, got set up, and how we selected these various options in the advanced and in the basic options. Okay, I'm going to continue on then. And here you see what the answer was. It was actually XXN, and percent showed up automatically. So the student entered in a percentage and they got a percent sign that shows up automatically. And that's the correct answer. So we're going to evaluate any of their responses with respect to this correct answer. It's been computed. Now we're going to save and enter the question name and the details. And now we're going to add a new step. And in this case, we're going to put in some Greek letters. Why not? Math has a lot of Greek letters. And I said LATEK, it's really latex. Okay. Capital T. And so now we're going to go to expression builder. So we had variable manager, we had table, and now we're going to use expression builder. Those are the three basic ones that I thought were the ones we should be focusing on. And we look at expression builder, and I want to have something looking like row of A1 given B2, the probability of an A1, I think was male given B2, Republican or Democrat, I forget, probably male given Republican, or late riser given got an A in the exam. So we have lots of different labels that we use for the A1 and B2 that's set up. And to get the Greek letters to show up is we use latex. And here you go, we put a backslash, which is the way you start the latex expressions. We want this kind of large. So I put in large, and then you put in the brackets. And then you put a bracket to get the row, Greek letter row, RHO in latex. That's how you do it. So if you say, I don't know, latex, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm just going to bring this up for a second. You can go online and say, hey, I want to look up Greek letters in latex. And you can get a little tutorial on how to do that, how to do the backslashes. Here, if you wanted an alpha, just backslash alpha, backslash beta, so forth. And there's all the different letters, and there's commands for large or small, italic or non-italic, a whole bunch of stuff in latex. And that's the kind of way to make it look the way it's supposed to look. I'm not an expert in latex. I also use Overleaf, which is, I guess, an online latex editor to play around with it. But once you have it figured out, then you just write the expressions you need. And sometimes you can copy and paste them from Overleaf straight into the Hawks section where you're writing up the question. I hope that helped people, give you a quick, just a super brief look at latex. But that's the way to make it look good. And you want the question to look nice. And they have latex documentation here as well. Click that and it'll explain it a little bit more. Okay, so now. So the next one. Let's see, we have here a look at the question. So you're going to review, you push a button to review the entire question. It will go through all of the steps of the question, one after the other. And you can look at it and see, well, is this what I wanted? Here's step one. What is the probability of random selected member of the sample is both late sleeper and cum laude student? Expenditure your answer to one decimal. Find conditional probability. Step two. A late speaker, given that they're an average student, express your answer as a percentage to one decimal. And we see how we've created this question and how the answers were in the Excel spreadsheet. And we use the Excel spreadsheet so we can randomize. If you have like 20 or 30 students and you have 100 lines or 200 lines, it's pretty clear most of the students are going to get a different question than one another. It's going to be unlikely that both of them will get the same question. And after they find out that they have different questions, they're going to stop trying. And then they'll put it into, photo math or something. And then each of these questions is unique enough that when you start seeing them show up on photo math and you know which student got this question, and you can tell them that in advance. I mean, if you do photo math, fine, you may get the answer, but I'm going to be able to figure out who it is because these are different questions. I'm not putting the same question and giving it to 50 students. I'm giving 100 different questions to 50 students. So you're going to have if you post that online, it's going to be an identifier. Okay, in a different semester, different term, there'll be other students, but with any given semester, the odds are you're going to be able to track them down. So I think that's a deterrent. I know there's a lot of cheating going on, but this, I think, is one way to deter it. Anyway, it's not foolproof, but I never discovered anybody cheating on my quizzes. I did check the photo math and some other, was it Chegg, a few other things. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to go now to the next one. And this one, I'm just saying, you can use these questions now that you've made them into homeworks and tests. So you have a web test and you can pull up one of these tests, and I have instructor questions, and I can copy a question from, and I've stored a whole bunch of questions of different types in some of the, I made tests with these questions, and then I copy questions from one test to another, or even just working them out, I can open up one of these questions. So you can drop this question in a homework, a quiz, and a final, for example. And that's it. That's how to make your own math questions in Hawks. A very hands-on, detail-oriented look at how you could do that. At that, I'll open it up for any other questions, if there are.
For any questions, you can just put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. If you have any at all, we will be happy to get them answered for you.
I guess that was too confusing, huh? So looking at Q&A or chat, no questions.
Not seeing any questions come through right now.
Okay.
I have a quick question. Have you found that in these questions that you've created for your students that they enjoy them or they find a little bit more of a challenge in them? What have you found with these?
It depends on the question. I didn't think Hawks had enough of these cross classification tables. And to me, that's so important in statistics that I wanted to make sure that any student that came through one of my stat classes just could do anything in a cross classification table. And that also is good for type 1 and type 2 error, that they understand how those tables are made. So a lot of them didn't know which question was which. The only way they knew was that when you ask for help or explanation, I didn't add help or explanation to my questions. I didn't have enough time. There is a way of adding it, but some of them, if they didn't understand it, they would press the button for help and explanation and find none available for that question and say, Professor, how come there's no explanation for question 8? And say, oh, that's one of my questions. I didn't have time to put it in. And so that's on that they didn't like. They wanted an explanation. Other than that, a lot of times people enjoyed it because some of my questions were a little more like I was able to make them a little more fun, I think. And I explained, now you're going to know some things that is not in the text. I would put in a little bit of material in the text to go with the question. So I would add notes in section 4.3. I'd add some extra slides or extra material on the bottom, say, we're going to do a lot more on these cross classification tables. So you have to not just put the question in necessarily if it's different material than what's in the text already. And you may want to do a little better job than I did on putting explanations in on your questions.
Did you find that question builder was pretty easy to use once you got a hang of it and could just start kind of putting your questions in?
Yes, no doubt there's a lot of investment initially in setting it up. How do you make this work? How do you do the spreadsheet? What type of options? However, once you have it set up for one question, it's not that hard to do another one. Change a few words, you have a table, copy the question over, change a few things, copy in a different spreadsheet. Now you got another question and it takes half the time. And then by your fourth or fifth question, it's very little additional effort. Just have to make sure your spreadsheet's right at that point. So I used it because I didn't really initially like the definition of percentiles in Hawks. It's one of the definitions, but not the one I favor particularly. And so I set up different material on percentiles and had different sets of percentile questions. So that was initially kind of hard, but once I got it going, once you get into it, it's really pretty easy, actually.
Thank you so much for answering that.
Okay.
I feel like some instructors find question builder somewhat intimidating when they first look at it. And so kind of hearing from someone like you who's used it pretty extensively is always good to hear that it's not as intimidating as it may seem at first.
I really like that Hawks has this facility, and if I'm voting, I think it's really important. We mostly want to use the Hawks material as it is, but there are cases where you want to do something different or emphasize something a little more or ask a question a different way. And it's really nice to have this facility. So I'm a big fan.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have any other questions for Dr. Robbin while we have him here?
Well, if you have any questions, just send me an email at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. You can definitely send your email to anyone in the chat, Dr. Robbin, if you would like to, if anyone would like to email him, ask him any questions that you might have after the session. I know sometimes it's hard to think of them right here on the spot. But I do see that there aren't any questions coming through, and I don't want to end the session early unless someone does have one. But otherwise, if there aren't any, we can wrap up a little earlier, and you guys can go on either to your next sessions, or we can get you to our booth, our Hawks booth, which I can go ahead and send some links here in the chat for everyone here. And
Okay.
And the last one here is the Hawks virtual booth. I realize my camera is not on, but the last link there is a Hawks virtual booth. Since we did end a little early, highly encourage you to go there since we have ended a little early. But when you go there, you can either go to the conference website if you'd like as well to see any of our other concurrent sessions that are going on after this. But like I said, if you do go by the exhibit hall, you can go by and say hello to our Hawks team, and there you can view a quick 5-minute demonstration, and you can be entered to win our hourly giveaway. So that would be a choice of a 6-month subscription to Audible, a 1-year subscription to Disney Plus, or a $100 Amazon gift card. So highly recommend you going in there and putting your name in for that hourly giveaway, because those are some really cool prizes. But other than that, thank you so much, Dr. Robbin. You had some wonderful, valuable information today. And for the rest of you, we will see you at your next session. Our next session here will begin at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So again, use those links for any of the other ones that are coming up here, and we will see you back here at 3 p.m. Thank you so much, Dr. Robbin, for your time today. I really appreciated hearing all those great things you're doing with Question Builder.
Thank you very much, Daisy.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of y'all day.
Take care. Bye-bye.